Some time ago, I went hunting in southeastern Idaho with a friend of mine. My friend's name is Darren. He's got a brother-in-law named Rick. And Rick invited us to come hunting with him with archery. So, as luck would have it, we hunted and hunted and hunted, got in and out of some elk. It was archery elk season. But one day we spread out topographical maps and looked at the region, and my friend Darren said, hey, why don't we go to this place here called Slug Creek? It's got water, it's got cover, it's got all sorts of things. He looked at his older brother-in-law, Rick, and Rick just went. I wondered what that was about, but I was new. I was just invited to that elk camp that year, so I stood down, didn't say anything, didn't push it, but I did file it away. Second year I hunted with them, similar situation. We were tapping out different areas, and as soon as you're in an area and you get busted by an elk or two or whatever, you kind of leave it alone, get your scent out of there, let the elk calm down. And after a while, in a 2-week hunt, you need other resources. So again, I remember we had a topographical map on the hood of a car or truck, and I kind of pointed it, and I said, what about that Slug Creek area? You guys mentioned that before. And Darren says, yeah, Rick, what about that? And Rick goes, no. And Darren goes, not even with 3 of us or something like that? And he goes, no. So I'm like, what is going on? So this goes on for a third and into a 4th year. By the 4th year, I'd gotten to know these guys really well. We'd had a lot of good conversations, a lot of good discussions. And that particular year, for whatever reason, Rick decided to explain why no Slug Creek. And he told me, before he started to finally say, it was around a campfire, and he was hesitant, but Darren kind of said, come on, you know him, he's not going to. So this is how Rick prefaced his story. He said, I am not saying that I saw a Bigfoot, and if you tell anybody that I'm saying I absolutely did, I'll deny it, because that's not what I'm saying. However, I had something incredible happen that can't be explained in my mind. Maybe somebody else can. And then he proceeded to tell me exactly what happened. So to the best of my recollection, this is what he told me. He said that him and a friend named Chris were hunting a new area years prior for mule deer. And the way they had to get to that area was park on a lower gravel road, hike almost straight up, a pretty decent climb and elevation, and hit a series of braided high meadows. In those high meadows, they anticipated that feeding animals would come out. So the idea was we hunt above the truck, go through those meadows, and then before dark come back. Then we know where the truck is in this new area. It was kind of before GPS and all that stuff. So you kind of just had to know where you were, mark it, flag it, or just keep aware. So sure enough, that's what they did. They hunted those braided high meadows and didn't see anything. Decided, let's go back and make sure we know we're above the truck somewhere. So all we have to do after nightfall is just drop off the mountain. We'll hit that road, can't get lost. The road's right down there. So he said they did that, but as they came back on a trail, they stopped, looked at the meadow, glassed it, went to see if there was any animals out. There wasn't, so they felt like it was safe to move without busting any wildlife through the meadow, get to a sitting position on the other side and watch until nightfall. So they made it over there. They're sitting down, and the way I recollect this story is Chris said to Rick, bear, there's a bear. And he said, what, where? And he goes, right over there. And he said he pointed over, and standing on the trail that they had just come through 20 minutes earlier, on the very trail that came through the timber and entered that meadow, was a bear standing on its hind legs. And they're like, that's a big bear. There's not grizzlies here, but that is a big bear. Could that be a grizzly? And they pulled up their scopes to dial in and get a better look at it. And Rick said the hair on the back of his neck stood up. That thing took a couple of more steps from the timber into the meadow and ducked a limb that, with their guns on their shoulders, on their slings with the barrels sticking up, they didn't have to duck. So he knew it was a large animal. And he said all of a sudden something went wrong with Chris, where Chris was saying, that's not a bear. That's not a bear. He goes, what? And he goes, that's not a bear. He goes, well, I'm looking at it, but I can't tell. What do you mean it's not? He goes, I'm going to shoot it. Which surprised him, because they didn't have a tag for a bear, and bear weren't legal without a tagger in that area. So he said something clearly was happening with Chris. There was a lot of fear, staggered breath, things like that. And he said, but the weirdest thing is as he was like, you're going to shoot it, Chris goes, I can't do it. And he said, what? He goes, I can't shoot. Why? We'll get into that later, that seems, there's a lot of stories where that's a common denominator. But anyway, just about the time that he was freaked out himself about what he was looking at, something on hind legs, standing that tall, has not yet dropped down to four legs, sniffing the air and surveying the same meadow. The fact that it hadn't dropped down and seemed to have tracked them, at least been on their same back trail. Just as all that was hitting him, he realized Chris isn't doing well, and Chris is like, we gotta go. I'm getting out of here. We gotta go. And he couldn't shoot it, didn't think it was a bear, and now was saying he's gotta go. Rick said he looked through his scope again, and as they watched this thing, he said it wheeled its head around, did not look at them, but looked up the meadow, deeper up into the depths of the meadow, looked up and kind of like it was fixing its eyes on something. And he said the strangest part of it was it took off, and this thing started running from the cover of the timber, but along the edge of it and in the edge of the meadow, so they had a very clear view of it. And he said this thing was leaping 3 or 4 sagebrush at a time, swinging its arms, never did drop on all fours, disappeared eventually. And he said, to this day, I don't know what it was. I'm telling you exactly what I saw, but I will not go to Slug Creek. Now, Rick was a man's man, kind of one of those alpha males, camps all by himself, stays out, listens for bugling elk in the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, so he can have them figured out where they are. He's not afraid to be out there alone. Anyway, long story short, it's not a guy who's fearful, and it's not a guy who's unfamiliar with wildlife. But he saw that and said, I won't go to Slug Creek, especially not in early morning or late evening. I won't do it. Because whatever it was had him so freaked out. Here's the weirder part, is his friend Chris, who I also met once or twice, would not talk about it, would excuse himself and just go home if somebody tried to press for the story. Even Rick himself said Chris won't talk about it since that day. That it's like it never happened. It's a panicky, weird, desperate kind of a feeling that Rick gets when he talks about it. So anyway, going back to the part about shooting, I don't know what he saw. I did hear about 15 years later from my friend Darren, who said, hey, you're not going to believe this. I got Rick to go to Slug Creek, but it was scouting and it was during the day. He still wouldn't stay there or camp there. But he did get him to go back eventually. I wasn't with him. But I guess that what happened eventually was Rick and Chris kind of quit talking about it, quit discussing what had happened, and to this day, Darren says they've never seen anything since. He said his brother-in-law doesn't bring it up. That was one of the only times he's ever heard him talk about it was to me by the campfire, and Rick never does. So the part about shooting, here's what I had heard in looking at other Bigfoot stories and stuff. I'm not an enthusiast. I'm not a believer or a disbeliever. I think the stories are fascinating. I listen to them. I watch that Rocky Mountain Sasquatch channel once in a while. Out of curiosity, I don't know if I had to swear that I did or didn't believe what I'd say, but I can tell you this, that it's not uncommon that other guys have drawn a bead on it in fear, and then at the last minute said they were strongly encouraged by something not to shoot. Like almost they were physically compelled or withheld or seized upon not to shoot. Like it's more common than I would have expected. So anyway, that's the story. And I never did make it to Slug Creek. I hunted around it, and I hunted in the same general vicinity, but never made it. So there's one. I have a few of those stories that different people told me, but that's probably the most significant one from one of the more credible sources. What do you think? Do you believe? Do you not believe? Do you think they're out there? Have you had an experience? Anything you couldn't explain? Let me know. Talk to me below.